We'll start the panel off with Tarun of Nike giving us an introductory presentation on his thoughts. And then we'll go through where I've requested each of the panel members to share their perspectives of a particular specific initiative and how that has helped them enhance brand value from a retail perspective. It can either be a positive or a negative example. And then based on the various themes that come about, we'll try to facilitate a lively panel discussion. I would welcome those of you who have questions to, as the discussion is going, to just flag your interest. I will keep my eyes open for your questions. So if you could just raise your arm, and I will try and weave your questions both during the panel discussion as well as after the Q&A. I have worn my military-style general's jacket for a particular reason, which is I will not entertain any monologue comments. It has to be a genuine question aimed at least one of the panel members. It has to be germane to the topic. If you deviate from those guidelines, I will not only cut you off, but I'm also authorized at the end of the session to take you away and make sure you never get a chance to meet any of the attractive girls at the Cazo hospitality desk. Okay, so with that, let's over to you, Tarun, to kick us off.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you all had a good lunch. The problem about having a good lunch is you guys are going to sleep. So I hope that you stay awake for the next 10 minutes. After that, you can sleep, no problems. So I want to start off by talking about the topic itself. The topic is really about creating value in brands. And that's an easy one, isn't it? For Nike to talk about what we do in digital or what we do in advertising is really simple. But that's not very pertinent or relevant to this particular august target audience. So made it a little more difficult for myself to really talk about how do you create brand value at retail. Okay? So that's a basic challenge I've set up for myself as we move forward. Let me start with a quote. Can we put off the lights, please, so that they can see the... Thanks. Let me start with a quote. All of you would have heard this many, many times. Build the brand and the business will follow, right? Easier said than done. A lot of people talk about it. Very few people actually do it on a regular basis because the problems of day-to-day working comes in between your thinking about long-term. So the question is, how do you do it? And let me assure you, there are many brands that do it at this point of time. Anybody who's been to an Apple store will agree with me. 70% of the space in an Apple store is dedicated to brand experience. I was told by one of my colleagues here, none of the people actually have sales targets. But by the way, the productivity is the best per square foot abroad. Yeah? And what brand experiences you get, what fantastic advice you get from the store staff. Great example of building brands. Diesel, another great example of building brands. Very focused about a target audience of young adults and thinking in terms of their positive and hedonistic lifestyle and then connecting that to what they do at retail. Now, all the examples that we have are not necessarily multinational brands. I think there are a number of ethnic brands that do a wonderful job in India. Think about Fab India. Think about Anoki, right? At one end, they create authentic ethnic experiences at a premium end. And incidentally, they charge for that, right? So you have ethnic product and you pay the price for it because it's a wonderful experience. But the other thing that they do right is that they go back to the people who make the product, the artisans, and they make sure that they are part of the entire equation. And that becomes really important because as consumers, you want to see brands doing more than just trying to sell to you, right? They have a social cause that they have kind of encapsulated. And I wanted to keep that at the back of your mind when I come to the key learnings that I would have from this particular session. And then I think the best of all is Harley-Davidson, where Harley-Davidson really manages to create an era and a tribe about itself, not only with the bike, but what they do inside the store. Just look at the way they've been able to bring the story alive. Yeah? And if you think about tribalism, Harley is the best example. And therefore, once you're part of the tribe, you pretty much buy everything that Harley puts up for sale. Right? Great example of thinking brand first and then saying, okay, fine, once I build my brand, business will definitely follow. All great examples of what you can do there. So coming back to the pertinent point about how does Nike do it, right? And I'd like to talk about what Nike does more in terms of the developing markets. And I'll start with a couple of mantras. The first mantra I want to talk about is that you have to start, you have to end, and you have to talk about everything else about the consumer. Okay? If you want to make money in business, start with the consumer, end with the consumer, and get neurotic about the consumer. In our case, the consumer is the athlete, right? So the first thing we say to ourselves is, listen to the voice of the athlete. And everything that we do permeates the thinking of what we can do for the athlete. That's mantra number one. Mantra number two is retail is our theater. Real estate in India is one of the most expensive in the world. We all bemoan the fact that our rent to revenue ratios are so high. What we forget is that captive space that we have, whether it's 1,500 square feet, whether it's 3,000 square feet or 30,000 square feet, has to be used more than just selling space. It has to be a way in which you can make an indelible connect with the consumer and sustain it over a period of time. So, keeping that in mind and talking about how retail is our theater and keeping the consumer at the very center of our discussion, you will note when I talk about the sub-points of retail is our theater, I will always refer back to the athlete because that's the center of our thinking. There are 5 key things I would like to put forward to you as to how we create value through our point of sale. The first is telling stories. The second is creating brand experiences. The third is athletes serving athletes. The fourth is innovation. And the fifth is motivation for the athletes. Okay? Let me take you through each one of them and try and expound on them a little bit more. So coming to the first one, telling stories. And I think a lot of brands do this. You can sell Manchester United jerseys by putting them up on a wall, right? But you look at the way it's been done here. You have Wayne Rooney. You have the entire Manchester United team. You suddenly have product in which they play the actual game, in which they train, and then in which they express themselves outside the training field in terms of lifestyle. You add equipment to it, and suddenly you have a holistic story. And where we do this, we sell 6 times the number of jerseys compared to places where we don't do it. Okay? I'm sure a lot of you think in terms of telling stories. Question is, ask yourselves whether you're really telling the story that you think you want to tell. Yeah? Clear? Let's get to the second one. And this is about creating brand experiences. And the example I've taken here is not an Indian experience. It's actually a South African experience that I've been absolutely fascinated with. It's a 2,000 square foot store, right? But the unique thing that they do in the store is that they have the Nike Run Club, which is about basically people like yourselves and me running, right? And they teach people how to run. The Nike Run Club starts at the store and ends at the store, okay? And inside that, they have lockers that they've given the guys who come to the Nike Run Club most often. There is a treadmill in which you can run in case it's raining outside. And they've got a pedometer which kind of puts together all the cumulatives of the runs that everybody in the Nike Run Club does. Okay? Finally, they test product and they trial product at that store. By doing so, you would have expected sales to drop because some part of the store has been carved out for the Nike Run Club. This store has much fewer SKUs, much fewer styles, and is up 60% ever since they've started to do that. Simple reason, because people believe when they think about running, this is the destination they will go to when they want to buy their product. They believe this place really understands them better than anyone else does. Point number 3. Imagine an athlete going into your store and you have a store staff that doesn't understand your product. The athlete is going to walk out, right? So we don't call our store staff, we call our store staffs athletes, right? And the only way you can get your athletes up to speed is by taking them out into the cricket fields, into the football fields, making them experience the product that we have because we have amazing product. So make them experience the product that we have. Here you have Vijendra Singh talking about training to the store staff who are athletes for us, right? So think about the consumer experience you're giving the athlete via your store staff. And are they truly authentic representations of your brand, yeah, in that particular environment? For us, what's most important is sport. So you take them out, to a place where you can give them that sporting environment and then then explain product to them. Trust me, much easier. The messages go home much easier, and they internalize it much better. Point number 4, and this is about product. Now, think of yourself as a runner. What you require as a runner in terms of footwear is simply faster and lighter shoes. In the last 42 years, all Nike has done is to make their shoes lighter and faster. This particular footwear that I put up here actually weighs 160 grams. It's lighter than any of the top 3 marathon runners wore in the World Championships in 2011. For people who know footwear, it's normally an accumulation of about 90 to 100 pieces, right? So footwear is quite complicated, extremely labor intensive. You put it together and it takes a lot of time. This is one piece. You then go to every extent possible to make sure you have product that connects up to that particular consumer. And the last point I want to make to you is that life is changing. Consumers are not there to just buy your products. Consumers want more. So let's think about what an athlete requires. An athlete requires motivation. People like you and me want to be motivated so that we can exercise more, so that we are fitter. The Nike Fuel Band, great example of that kind of an offering. The Nike Fuel Band basically takes any kind of exercise that you do during a day and it converts it into fuel points. So you know as to how much of energy you've expended in a year, in a day. So I have, for example, a Nike Fuel Band here, and if I press it, it basically tells me how much have I done. You'll see it's largely in the red, quite simply because all I've done is to take a flight and I've had lunch. So if you have no exercise, naturally you're not going to get any points, right? So great way to motivate people like us to be better athletes. At the same time, you're also talking about athletes who play basketball or who train or who run. The guys who play basketball want to know how their game has gone, how high they jump, etc. These are tools that actually help them do so. So in summary, what are the key learnings that I have? Very simple learnings that I've taken from Nike and put forth to retailers. The first is be neurotic about listening to the voice of your consumer and internalize it. The second is retail is our theater. And in retail, you have to think about 2 things, brand and product. In terms of brand, think about how you maximize the brand within retail. Tell amazing stories, create great experiences for the consumer, and make sure you connect with the consumer with your store stuff, right? In terms of your product, please make product your hero. Be proud of your product, right? Make sure that your product connects to your consumer. Make sure every product in your store connects to your consumer. And finally, life has changed. It's important that you think beyond product. Think about sustainability. Think about the artisan that actually made that product for you. Think about motivation and services. What are the value adds you can give the consumer? Because trust me, the consumer is looking for much more than just the product that you sell. So that's pretty much it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarun, for an excellent overview. Nike, of course, is a great example of this topic. But let me now throw it over to our panelists, and feel free to talk about your brand or any other brand example that you feel is germane, either a positive or a negative example of using the retail space for creating value for your brand.
I'll tell you, as in terms of certain specific examples on the retail front, as I'll take an example in terms of the store staff. Basically, that's the only human interface that you have from the brand side with the consumer. So I started off 5-7 years back in terms of Indian retail, wherein we said in terms of a basic level of training, the guy knowing the product, then came in terms of steps saying that probably you given an allowance in terms of saying his grooming standards are great, but things are moving fast, and taking it from where Tarun said, as in that you need an athlete to sell a product to an athlete. So if I look at on the fashion side of it, as in when I'm looking at store staff, we are looking at people as in who are able to connect with the consumer on a fashion aspects. So it is somebody more in terms of saying rather than a service, as in somebody treating you in terms of just providing a size, somebody who's talking off in terms of what is the latest fashion if you're looking at a particular top, as in how could you top it up with a particular jacket or coordinate it with a denim or a bottom, what are the latest colors of the season, how does it look, and as in going down to the extent in terms of, I have specific examples within our brands wherein they actually relate to the consumer more as a friend than as a store staff. So these guys are as in going to the extent of, in terms of going on the BBM, sharing BBM pins, being on BBM with the consumers, talking to them on a regular basis, sending them pictures in terms of whatever new is coming onto the store. So that is the level as in terms of the store staff that probably we need to get to in terms of every sphere of retail when it comes to interface with the consumer. Another aspect that I would like to point out is that in terms of the overall thing, in terms of the so-called integration of various forms of media, as in today, store is one aspect of it wherein we are interfacing with the consumer, but the consumer also interfaces with us on various other forms. So as in terms of the social media aspect of it or the website part of it, as in you need to ensure that as in when you're connecting with the consumer, it's a whole 360-degree connect. You can't as in say that I'll miss out on a particular point because I do it, I don't do it, or the brand doesn't agree to it, because today the consumer is also getting savvy. So another example that probably I'd like to quote in terms of the French connection business that we do is that we actually probably were the first brands in India to have an India-centric website for the brand. And again, in terms of, we actually have a screen on each of our stores wherein consumer can actually have a look and see all the product ranges that are there on the, with us through the season. So those are as in a couple of examples wherein I feel in terms of, even when we are talking of retail, it has to be that holistic experience that we deliver to the consumer.
Thank you, Manish. My name is Rajesh Jain and I represent Lacoste. I'm delighted to be a part of this forum and to be sharing my thoughts about a subject on which I am very passionate. Lacoste has been an amazing case study for me on this. To understand the ethos of the brand, how it has evolved over the last 20 years in India, along with the consumer profile. I remember very well my college days when I was younger. I saw an actor wearing a polo shirt with a crocodile on his chest. And it left me completely mesmerized. I got so fascinated with this crocodile logo that I instantly equated it with a symbol of great importance. Lacoste, of course, over the period has equated itself, has evolved into a complete lifestyle brand, an affordable luxury in sync with the international positioning. But the question is, how does a logo become the symbol of the value of the brands? My personal belief is that there are many elements that go into making the value of a brand. However, the two most important pillars are innovation and quality. So as I represent Lacoste, I would take Lacoste as a case study for this. This international renowned brand had its humble beginning in the sporting life of Mr. René Lacoste. This tennis legend, he actually created a garment for himself, for his own comfort and for his own ease. Because at that time when he used to play, people used to play all the sports wearing long-sleeved starched shirts only. And it was not conducive to play in hot American summers during that time. So he invented a padded piqué shirt, half-sleeved polo, for his own comfort and ease, which was very good at elegance also. It never lost elegant touch. And on the quality side, it was a perfect garment. It gave a fashion statement on the coat and a style statement off the coat also. So the quality of the garment withstood the test of time also. And this brings the core values of Lacoste, which are innovation, comfort, elegance, and quality. So we know all the retailers they have to understand and offer value to the customer. And those are the core values for any brand. The promise of trust, quality, perceived benefits. They make the customer buy your product for the first time. And once the customer has certain degree of trust on your quality, he comes for a repeat purchase. And after that, because of his repeat purchase, his trust on your quality, and the word of mouth reviews that he gets, he becomes a loyal customer. So this is how a brand evolves. It gets engraved in the customer's mind. If I look at Lacoste, over 75 years of heritage, and Lacoste has withstood the test of time because it has never compromised on its quality and innovation both. Of course, a first mover advantage always helps any brand. Lacoste L1212 polo, iconic polo, the kind of polo that I am wearing, it was the first time in the documented history that a logo appeared outside a garment. But that was not the only thing. It was the kind of fabric that was used in Lacoste that continues to be used. The yarn counts, all those elements do go into it. And in addition to that, innovation plays a very important role. So the Lacoste L1212 iconic polo, which is offered in 5 style fits, like regular fits, Italian fits, or stretch fit, they continue to be offered to all the customers for all type of body fits. And along with that, Lacoste offers new innovative styles, new fabrics, new yarn counts, fluid fabrics, fabric finishes. All those things go into making it an innovative and quality product. So that brings me to the second pillar of a brand value, which is innovation. So in my opinion, these two are the most important elements to make the brand a value proposition. While of course there are other things like your visual merchandising, your footprint, the number of footprint, how the visual merchandising has gone into it, your communication efforts, all those things of course are there. But in my opinion, they're more of hygiene factors. They have to be there. No brand can afford not to have those things. But the most important pillars are innovation and quality. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajesh, and Manish for setting that up. Before I, request my colleagues, I'd really request you to tease out for our audience and for this panel, what is the specific aspects of retail in building the value of the brand? Just to play devil's advocate to the points Rajesh made and just to help spur up a lively debate, I was thinking about the points Rajesh was making, and I was just wondering, what is it that would make a person want to go to a Lacoste store to buy a Lacoste product as opposed to, buy it from any other departmental store or from a e-tailing channel, for example. So I think if you could, dwell a little bit about the retail specific aspects, that would be great.
Deepak Agarwal from Kazo, and I think, as Mr. Pavan said, retail plays a big role in making the brand. And as a colleague was telling all about the Nike and things like that, retail experience, the brand experience, is all about the brand experience. And the brand experience is definitely very well connected to retail. I can give you, Kazo, I'm very proud to say Kazo has been one of the brands which has been positioned themselves very well through retail. And I think we would have never been able to do that if we had been choosing any other channel except retail. If you see, there are many brands, if you go across Europe, there have been numbers of brands in line, which have been brands for years, but they are not the retail brands, I would say. They are brands in fashion, but they're only wholesale brand. They've been making the collections, using the channels to sell throughout the country in different small stores, and then supplying the goods to them. So they are using the channel which is called wholesale channel or different other channels. But if you talk about retail brand, I think the brands who are retailing, who are totally purely into retailing, fashion brands, they have a different outlook and a different catchment altogether. They give the brand experience. They don't sell only the brand they sell, the brand experience. And that is what I think Kazo have been doing so far. So we've been selling experience for the customer who comes in. Of course, no doubt, as our colleague Lacoste was telling about, end of the day, it's experience and three main things for retail, which I would say it's product, product, and product. That is for sure the main criteria for retailing, but it is all connected to retail with the brand, how you position yourself. And that's how it is. Yes, please.
So when you're bootstrapping and when you are running low on cash and you have the debate between choosing to invest into a brand versus, you know, putting up a store and getting operational, which one would you choose and how do you fight that battle?
It's two different games. What do you want to look into as a strategy? If it is the game for first, where you consider it's brand or you consider the numbers. So, and I think that's has been the problem with India, that it has always been putting the numbers first and the brand number two. And what the Kazo has been using as a strategy, brand is number one. We believe the brand and then we talk about the numbers. So of course, we'll first go and look into branding ourselves. That would be our strategy.
Yeah, can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Rajiv Chetri. I work with the Nokia retail team. So my question here is basically, I think what you guys talked about is pretty good, but I'll just stick to India. And whatever you've just shown on slides, and we talk a good thing about consumer experience, that every retail store has to deliver that. But my personal experience, and I'm a very regular consumer of Nike, and I also look at other brands. But my personal experience of that is, I think, in terms of real consumer experience and delight, we are at a very nascent stage in India. And it's not only about the retail stores. I mean, you go to any, right from booking a cab in the airport to, those kind of experience, we're really poor. So what do you guys think that, that if you really want retail to be the flag bearer or theater, as he mentioned it, what should be done so that whatever you have in the planning stage gets executed properly at the store level? Because it's where the rubber meets the road, ultimately, for a consumer like me. So what do you think you guys should do? And from a very India, again, I'm just sticking to India specific.
Yeah,
and
I think we tend to be apologetic about India, which is not right. Okay, just because we're in India, the consumer today does not give us that allowance, because the consumer today is seeing stores in India and is seeing stores in the UK and the US, right? So that little thing that we can put together and say, hey, this is India and chalta hai, has to leave. I get where you're coming from. I guess the fundamental thing is, are you setting the North Star or where you want to go? Life is a journey, right? There are practicalities of what you have to do on a day-to-day basis. But are you clear about what you want to get to and when you want to get to that, right? Once you've got that clarity in mind, and as long as you're unrelenting towards that, yeah, it's fine. So there are going to be bumps along the way. There are going to be practicalities that you'll have to manage along the way. But every season, if you're not doing a better job of your merchandising and your retail and the quality of the brand experience you're giving the consumer, you're not doing your job.
As you're talking about specifically of India, I can say to you that, of course, the awareness in our country is not as per the awareness in Europe, because there are so many like-minded brands. And India is, of course, coming up with so many brands. Slowly, like if you see, we ourselves as a brand Kazo, where we are sitting with the brands competing to us like Mango, Zara, French Connections, or so on, we are doing much better in those malls than the malls where those brands are not existing. So I think it's a point of awareness. And when the person starts linking himself to the brand, that's all about the brand. I think it's the whole experience. And I think that has been somehow in India that we have not focused on the experience, to give that experience to the customer. And if you see, the Kazo has always been how we've been focusing ourselves, as he was saying about the stand we have. It's about the own factor, what we want to create in the brand Kazo.
I think one of the points I really love the panelists to bring out, and this might be a good segue for me to hand over to Rakesh, is in relation to the question the gentleman asked about the difference in consumer experience in the Indian context. I suspect a lot of that actually has to do with the enthusiasm and zeal of the retail representatives or the store associates the extent to which they have the requisite product knowledge and convey the enthusiasm for the brand. So I'd love for you, both of you, to share your experiences in that aspect.
Excuse me, can I
This
just
guy
add to
has
that?
managed to crack it by having the most attractive-looking women at the store. But how do you do it?
Excuse me, can I just add on to that? Because, so my question was, why do we have a different consumer experience elsewhere in the world, and why a different level of consumer experience in India? That's my question. Why do we have that gap?
So thanks, Pawan. I'll talk about how a retail can play a role of brand building, because I think the core subject today is that we sometimes feel that we can build a brand through mass media, and retail is a place where we'll transact business, do sale. Of course, that we do, but I think we underestimate the power of branding which retail can bring, and I think I'll bring you back to the point which Pawan was making. The key question here is that how does your store consumer experience link up with the brand personality? Because the moment of truth which the customer gets in the store about the brand, the customer walks into your store with a particular brand thinking in mind, which you have communicated, and the moment of truth happens in the store. So what we have been trying at Raymond is that let us design the DNA of the store. Because the point you're making is that how do you make the store experience synergize with the brand thought? But it has to be designed. It cannot be by accident, and every store this has to happen. So in Raymond, what we have done, we said the DNA of the store, which is through a process of linking the brand, is warmth, expertise, responsiveness, which is in line with the complete man positioning which Raymond has. Now, just by merely saying so, it doesn't happen. Then we have designed the steps in the store which will make sure that when the client walks in, he gets these 3 points in various interactions. It could be at the cash desk. It could be at the point when we are telling the customer how to choose the garment, but he's to get that. So I think an arbitrary design of a customer experience doesn't build the brand. The point I'm making is you design it, synergize with the brand ethos, and then you replicate by training through people, the merchandising and all that experience which you have.
For us, the challenge was actually multifold, because most of the people you see here, most of them are international or national brands, which are extremely well known. For us, we had 2 large challenges. One was really the fact is that how do you compete as a store brand? Today, if you walk into a Shoppers Stop, you walk into a lifestyle, chances are that you're completely aware of the underlying brands which are there at that store, whether it be a Nike, whether it be a French Connection, a Lacoste. Of course, Lacoste is exclusive store, sorry. But the chances are that you are aware of that brand. So can you imagine Lifestyle or Shoppers Stop selling 100% of its products under its own name, whether it's Stop or it's Lifestyle? And how difficult would that be to do? So at one hand, we had a challenge of building aura as a brand, to connect as a store brand. And the other issue was that traditionally in India, jewelry is being sold by the family jeweler generation after generation after generation. So there's a huge amount of personal connect in that. And therefore, when we were looking to position, how did we build a 360-degree brand, both online as well as at the ground level? And one of the issues which, when we did research, we discovered something very interesting, city after city. All women told us is that my jeweler cheats. The only difference is, they said all jewelers cheat. The only difference is my jeweler cheats less than the others. So the known devil is better than the unknown devil. So trust was definitely a critical issue to build. But in a market where, you've got each individual store which is very, very strong, whether it's a TBZ or it's a GRT in the south or Mehra Sun in Delhi, they're extremely well known. So how do you compete against that? And while we are the world's largest diamond manufacturing company as Rosy Blue, what we discovered, nobody at the retail level really knew us. So one option for us was to go out and shout, saying the world's largest diamond manufacturing company. Would it get us the trust? The answer is yes. But in a category like jewelry, would it really appeal to the woman who is really our main consumer? Because trust is a necessity, it is not a requirement for purchase. So, of course, then we went on to create a film. And what we realized that the passage of time was akin to building trust. So that film was shot in south of Italy in a place called Malta, where it showed the women from the beginning of time through wars being fought, ultimately coming to the shores of India. And of course, that did very well for us. But at the end of the day, we spend 1/30th, 1/40th of the marketing spend what anybody else in the space does. So how do you get the consumer to walk in? If they walked in, how do you get the consumer to buy? And I think Tarun made a very interesting point on how you can use the store space to build the brand proposition. For example, for us, we've got 2 or 3 huge legacies. One is the fact that we've got a great diamond background. We've got a Belgian heritage. And our point was really to build that across at the store level. So you've got bevel glasses, you've got faceted windows. But the most important thing was that what we realized on the issue of trust, which I began with, is when a consumer walks in, he or she is unlikely to go to the sales staff and ask him, please tell me something about your brand. They're not going to say, what does Nike do, or what does the Lacoste do, or what does the Raymond do? They will come in, experience the brand, and walk out. So we've discovered that on an average, a woman spends half an hour at a store. So what we did is we created heritage walls. And every store has a heritage wall which talks about who we are. So one in 18 diamonds belongs to us. 5 global design centers. Moulin Rouge, the diamonds was used by us. So we've tried to create stories within the store. And I think the last and the most important thing is really about the ability of the sales staff. You don't need smooth selling sales staff. I think it has to be based on knowledge and consumer understanding. And at the end of the day, and I think, Tarun, you made a very important point, that unless the sales staff don't believe in that, unless they don't look at it as from an athlete's point of view, you will not be able to sell. So I think the training at the staff level, the fact that they must have product knowledge is absolutely essential. And our overall experience has really, really been very positive.
Let me just build up on that point and come back to Tarun, because Tarun wanted to respond. I'm just wondering, coming back to the gentleman from Nakia's question, the ability of the store staff to fulfill the promise is one part of the equation. But I'm also wondering whether there's something fundamentally different in the expectations of the Indian consumer vis-a-vis in other parts of the world or not. So your thoughts on that thing?
So I don't think the expectation of the consumer is different. But I think there are some reasons why we've not been able to get the quality of experience that we want to get to. Firstly, please remember, retail in India is very young, right? Compare it to, the US, etc., where it's been there forever. We have a journey of 20 years that we've, encompassed, and FDI is just coming in. So I think we should not be that harsh on ourselves. The second, and I think probably the biggest reason why we are not being able to give good experiences is because of the size of our stores. And the reason our size of stores tends to be a little smaller is because of the rent to revenue ratios that most of us encounter. So more often than not, you'd go for minus 200 square feet than plus 200 square feet. The problem is that when you have a smaller box size, how do you create the experience? Which is why I gave you the example of South Africa rather than giving you a Nike town which is 20,000 square feet. And it's impractical from an Indian perspective. The third is that if you think about your store staff, most of the people coming in are from tier 3, tier 4 cities, right? And their turnover tends to be very high. As a result of which they don't spend enough time understanding product. They don't understand premium. And I don't think a lot of us spend enough time and effort and money in training them. And I think last is that there is a certain degree of complacency where we wrongly assume that the consumer accepts it. But let me assure you that the consumer is as finicky in India as anywhere else in the world. And there will be a time when he's going to say enough is enough and move forward.
I think that was the perfect segue to my question. I essentially wanted to speak to you about, okay, so when you have your own flagship store, when you have more space to play around with, it's much easier to give that brand experience that we are all talking about. But let's say when we're talking about a shop and shop, how do you create the same kind of brand experience in a shop and shop versus a flagship store?
See, basically, in terms of the biggest thing is that even the shop in shop, you have to treat it as your own store. So it starts right from the beginning in terms of the furniture that you put in. So it cannot be that you will go into a generic fixture. You will say that you will have your own furniture. You will, in terms of the merchandise that goes in, it has to be clear that you decide in terms of the merchandise that goes in. So again, you emphasize on the product, saying that this is my lead product, this is how it's got to be merchandised, this is how it has to be put on the floor. Third, in terms of the overall environment that you create, so again, in terms of the people that man those shop-in-shops. So you cannot have generic staff in terms of you go into a shop-in-shop, into a shopper's shop and say you have generic staff who's servicing the consumer who's coming in. So you need to have your own staff. So basically in terms, it's the same ingredients in terms of basically the whole store environment. So for a consumer, as in terms of that 200, 250, 500 square feet of space within a 20,000 square feet store, he has to feel that he's walking into your store and he has to have the same experience that he would have in his store. Again, you would have a limitation in terms of it might not be as in the biggest store that would be there. It might not be 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000 square feet. But within that space, you should be able to create, and as in that's what we try and do, to create the same brand experience that the consumer would have in an exclusive standalone store.
Well, I can say that shop-in-shop model for against the flagship store you're talking about, there is definitely a great difference between shop-in-shop model. When we started up, we were, of course, also starting up some with shop-in-shop. And we see by doing that, we are diluting the brand. And we need to work on first only flagship stores or EBOs so that we are sure. And even the same goes with the franchisee model in India. As he was just rightly saying, the store size and the mindset, people changing in India, the employment and all, they're not well aware about the brand hygiene. What does the brand means? What is all brand about? So we've been very, very focused on positioning the brand. And in fact, we created the level that now the people come in, the experience what we give them, they say, is the brand from Italy? So everybody, most of the people in the fraternity still thinks the brand is from Italy. It's not from India anymore. So that is about positioning. And I think we could have never done that if we would have been starting up with a model of shop-in-shops or I would say franchisee. It's after the brand is mature to handle that shop-in-shops and create that understanding with the shop-in-shops. Then, of course, it can create the same experience. Yeah.
I would have some very, very simple advice for you. And this we've learned the hard way, which is that when you're looking at shop-in-shops where you're worried that you're going to get lost, make choices. So we have 7 categories, right? And if you ask us, we want to put all 7 categories in 500 square feet. Consumers don't understand it. If you take away 6 of those categories and just focus on 1 category and make the story come alive and have good product to back it up, it'll win. You put more product in and you go wide, you lose.
My name is Chintan Chopra. I'm from Nokia Retail. So my question is to Mr. Puri. When we are talking about brand experience, so we are saying that most of the time we are talking about the in-store experience. As a consumer, I feel that my journey about brand experience is in 3 phases, which is pre-purchase, in-store, and post-purchase. So most of the companies take care about the first 2 phases. It's the pre-purchase, they do a lot of advertising. Even in-store, people are now getting awareness and doing something about it. But what about the post-purchase experience? So as a consumer, I feel, most of the retailers and most of the companies forget once the purchase happens. So since Nike is such a strong brand, so what's your take on the post-purchase experience?
So you're right. I think that's something that is lacking across the industry, and it's something that needs to be made much stronger. So a lot of the consumer feedback is not normally regularized, and it's not consistent. I think a consumer feels much better if he or she knows exactly what they're getting into at the point of purchase so that there is no disappointment later, right? We've tried to build systems there, right? So we have people dedicated to talking to consumers to make sure that if there is any disappointment at all on the product, there is quick replacements, etc. that is done. The other part which is very important, which is also a post-purchase phenomena, is the quality of your product, right? So don't be in a hurry to sell. Because if you have a substandard product that you have, chances are not only will that consumer not come back, he or she will influence 10 other consumers not to come to your store. So be very sure about the product that you are selling before you get into selling. But I agree with you. That's one part. More work has to be done.
Post-purchase experience is also an opportunity. Because many times we feel that if you see there's one regular experience of the brand and the customer walks in, makes a purchase and walks out. But when there is a post-purchase need and there are small difficulties and you handle it very well, that's the way to build loyalty. We shouldn't see it as a problem. It is an opportunity provided you handle it exceedingly well. Because that's the time you are able to build lifelong relationships. If you have to handle that point very well. Many times we see that post-purchase is a headache, but actually that's the way to build relations.
When we are talking of a retail store, we are talking about a retail store to brand building. If retail is considered as a store, if the retail is a kiosk, but the idea is very good as a kiosk, how is it in long term for brand building in that? The outlet is a very small outlet, it's in the form of a kiosk. Does it help in the long term for brand building?
Yeah, I mean, it's as valid as in a store-in-store, right? I think we forget, we think of the outlet at a place of transaction. And we just look at the hygiene factors. My point is that if you start looking at it as a point where you can build your brand, and you are very clear about your brand proposition and who your consumer is, you could do a lot more because you've already got the people, right? You've already invested in people. You've already invested in products, right? It's a question of walking the last 20% to make sure you leverage what you have to another level. And I go back to the example I've given you of the South African store. What did they do? They had a store. They were selling. Till now, they were selling and they were doing well. Somebody decided that out of the 2,000 square feet, I'm going to take 100 square feet and make a small Nike club, and I'm going to get people to run through my store. That's all they did, and they trialed product. Those 50 people who are coming every day for a run tell 500 more people about, hey, this is an amazing place to go and buy product. So I'm just saying that you've got to be innovative, and you've got to find solutions, right? I mean, when I started off, Nike stores tend to be 20,000 square feet. Now, I don't have a 20,000 square feet place to go, but the principle remains the same as you come down.
Thank you.
I think just building on this point, it's, we can't have this conversation in a vacuum. It's always a function of how well known your brand already is. What is it that you're aspiring for that brand to be? And to some extent, the revenue per square foot versus rental per square foot ratio. So on this point, I'd really be quite keen to get a bit of a sample across the panel to try and get a sense, to the extent that they're comfortable sharing this, is what would be their mix of investments in brand building vis-a-vis the retail store level investment versus other brand building investments. I mean, if you roughly take as a rough rule of thumb, the retail store investment would range anywhere from 25 lakhs to about 1 crore per store, and the store footprint would range anywhere from 10 to 100 plus. So, I mean, this is not small chump change by any stretch of the imagination. So I think we just run across, if any of the panelists would care to share their retail share of investment versus other brand building investment, that would help shed some light on this question as well.
No, I think early in you had asked a question about where would you put the investment in. And I think we had this huge debate internally saying, should we increase stock? Or should we put money in the entire experience of the brand at the store level? On an average, we spent approximately $100 a square feet. And we put up this flagship store in Delhi, which was a 3-level store. And we spent twice the amount of money. And of course, at rents which were exorbitant. We also increased our stock there. And one of our biggest learning is that the sales actually shot up. So in 2 years' time, the sales have gone up 4 times. It today is our most profitable store. So the point is really that at the end of the day, that consumer experience and brand building is very, very important. And it also, of course, depends on the category which you are selling. Because if you go to another family jeweler, they'd probably keep 20 or 30 times the stock. But the sales staff are not trained to give the entire experience about what that product is all about. So for us, I think, the investment, on an average, a store would have, let's say, between 5 and 10 crores of investment a single store would have. And the investment in the store itself would be around 1 crore. So it's basically between 10 and 20% of the stock value goes into the store layout.
I was talking not about the investment in a store, but I was talking about your brand building investment. What proportion is that going into retail stores versus what proportion you would spend above the line or in other media to create your brand?
For us, it's 50-50. So 50% is above the line and 50% is BTL. And BTL is again divided at a very regional level. So each RSM and each store actually has a say on how that money is spent. And that's worked extremely effectively for us.
Well, in our case, I would say in the beginning, the strategy was to focus totally on the brand building. And our percentage of share of investment would be maybe 75% on brand building and 25% on retail store building. And of course, as we are moving further, the percentage of ratio is becoming different. So it's all about how you are focusing as your strategy. Is it more brand you're focusing on? You're focusing on the real business. So I think it's all about the strategy.
We are having standalone stores as well as mall format stores. These mall format stores recently started to create, the branding level. So we are keeping the same product with the same price in the mall format level to create, that experience, feeling, look, and everything is, is better than the standalone format. But customers, they feel that the prices, they perceive the price is maybe high. It is a psychological block. So how can we break that block? Because the same product, same price, everything is same. Only we change to create more customer shopping experience, but they are not, coming to the store. They are saying, after a study, they said that your product is price is high now, without looking at the product.
Which product are you in?
We are in children's apparel industry.
I think firstly, I would question whether it's exactly the same consumer or is it different? Because at times what tends to happen...
Same region, same customer.
Okay, so then remember one thing which is very important. When you have a standalone store, that consumer is exclusively coming to your store, right? When that consumer is going into a mall, that consumer has the ability to go to 4 other stores, compare prices, and then decide. Especially if he decides to go to a Pantaloon or a multi-brand outfit. Therefore, it's very important you understand the mindset of that consumer and you have the right product for the right channel. We tend to do a cookie cutter approach and expect the consumer to behave rationally and logically in both channels. The mindset that the consumer goes into a mall is slightly different from the mindset he comes into an EBO.
Customers are not entering to the store, so they are just watching outside and seeing the, everything, and they are deciding that they are not entering to the store.
No, absolutely. If I can address that issue, and we went through a huge debate when we were putting up the Aura stores, to put them as standalone stores or put them as shop-in-shop. One of your advantages is the fact that in a shop-in-shop store, the volume or the number of traffic you don't need to ever worry about. You will always have an X number of people walking through the mall, walking through the departmental store, and therefore a certain percentage would convert in terms of buying. The challenge which I think you're currently facing is that you don't have enough traffic walking into your store, and if the traffic is lower compared to the mall, then the issue is, are they buying a lower value item and therefore the store is not breaking even?
They are willing, they are coming and buying from our standalone store. The same customer are going back and buying from there.
No, I thought you were saying they were buying from the mall or they're buying from the standalone stores?
Standalone store they are buying still.
They're still buying from the standalone stores. So then I think it's probably an issue of price point in terms
price
of...
is not changed.
No. It's not an issue of whether you're selling it at a discount or not. The issue is really... No, one second.
See, what normally happens... Excuse me. If I give you the example of Lacoste, we have very few shop-in-shop and we've experienced exactly the same thing. What happens when a customer walks into a shop-in-shop, he has a different mindset. He looks at so many different brands and it's more of an impulse purchase rather than going for that particular brand. Because he's not expecting the same kind of experience that he would get in an exclusive brand outlet. He goes, looks through so many brands. He says, whatever is the cheapest, I'll buy, and it's just an impulse purchase. But when he goes to an EBO, he is already prepared to shell out a certain kind of money for a certain kind of quality, for a certain kind of brand experience. That is the reason when you face this problem, that is exactly the same throughout all the brands. They have to have relatively cheaper in terms of pricing, not in terms of quality. In terms of pricing, they have to have a cheaper product available in shop and shop, which can work as an impulse purchase.
I think the amount of free consulting on offer here is very worrying for a former partner of a
I didn't
strategy
get
consulting firm.
any
one
constructive suggestion.
No, this is very
Because
simple.
that question is, I think, the understanding is different. See, I have created an ambience for the customer by
doesn't matter.
spending, money
Too bad.
and with the same product. But that customers are not coming.
It doesn't matter. I think the answer consistently from across the panel, my friend, to you is you need to find a way to communicate a more value offer in the mall scenario versus the standalone. Now, how you do it is up to you, but I think the answer is very consistent across all the panelists, unless Deepak has...
It's the same. I think it is. They should find value for money when they're coming to you.
We will find a way to
you
bill
have to
you
study
at
the
the end,
market,
so we know where you live.
you should not take the things for granted. The market is changing. People are getting more and more smarter.
One last question.
My question is to Mr. Rakesh Pandey. Since Raymond being a brand across India, it is present in Tier 1, Tier 3, how does brand building differ from a Tier 1 scenario to a Tier 3 scenario?
See, as one of the panelists said earlier, Tarun was saying, see, the customer expectations are converging across tiers. Our experience is that the Tier 4 customer and the Tier 1 customer in his mind is converging to the same aspiration. So by and large, I would say we'll keep the same kind of brand value, brand experience. The merchandise might differ because I think we have to see the localization issues there, and the kind of merchandise we decide would be slightly different. But we don't differentiate majorly between the customer aspirations. And we're seeing that converging a lot.
Considering to the fact that Tier 3 might have even lesser spaces as compared to Tier 1, like Mr. Puri rightly pointed that we are very less in retail space, right? At the same time, the less retail space also means lesser retail space in Tier 3 as well, somewhere down the line, right? And at the same time, the kind of budgets, the marketing budgets that we have on hand, that also defines our limitation further. The brand is already not visible there, right? People, specifically if I am talking about a remote place like Kakinada, let's say in Andhra Pradesh, or a even remote place like Srikakulam in AP, again. So in those places, these people are not aware about.
Can you get your question, please?
No, I'm saying that if you look at the retail environment in these towns you mentioned, it is one road where everybody is coming in and everybody is shopping there. So see, all the buying, selling, branding happens in that small road because, as you know, the infrastructure is not kept up with the prosperity levels in that region. So in that context, you have to maintain your brand experience as the leading brand, but you may not have the same kind of size and stuff which you get in metro. But you maintain the consistency in terms of relative terms. And that way you maintain your brand value.
Thank you. Thank you, Rakesh. I think we're going to call this quits because they've opened the bar and I can see plenty of wine flowing out there. So I just want everybody to please join me in thanking the panelists for an outstanding display of free consulting. And thank you very much.